There's something almost magical about an actor who can appear on screen and immediately make you feel at ease, as if he's lived in your home for years, sharing laughter and tears through late night reruns and family gatherings. It's that familiar smile, that quiet strength, and the twinkle in the eye that says, "I've been around the block a few times, kid, and I've got plenty of stories to tell." Today we're going to explore the life and legacy of one such beloved figure. You've likely seen his steady hands guiding frantic army doctors on a makeshift operating table, or perhaps you've caught him trading barbs with a stoic partner on a police beat. Either way, you know him even if you don't realize it. That man is Harry Morgan, a name that rings with timeless warmth in Hollywood's golden echo chamber. He was a character actor who spent decades drifting from one role to another, surprising everyone by showing just how versatile and deeply human he could be. And yet behind that composed and fatherly exterior, there was a real person with struggles and triumphs spanning nearly a century of American life. Harry Morgan was never the loudest voice in the room. He never had to be. Instead, he was that reassuring presence in the corner, the anchor that kept a TV show or a film grounded. Fans of classic television still remember him best for his portrayal of Colonel Sherman T. Potter in the legendary military comedy MASH. Others discovered him as Officer Bill Gannon on the classic police procedural Dragnet, while some older fans might recall his appearances in many black and white films of the 1940s and 1950s under the name Henry or Henry Harry Morgan. Over a prolific career that spanned over half a century, he became one of Hollywood's go-to supporting actors, an everyman with a twinkle of mischief, a man who could make you laugh and cry without breaking a sweat. In short, he was real. This is not just a journey into the bright lights and big names of classic Hollywood, but also into the tapestry of 20th century America, an era marked by roaring industrial progress, a global war that shook entire continents, and seismic cultural shifts that reshaped the fabric of daily life. Harry Morgan lived through it all. Born into a world on the brink of the First World War, he would see the Great Depression, the Second World War, the rise of television, and the digital age, all before quietly leaving the stage in 2011 at the age of 96. Imagine the stories he might have shared if given the time. Stories not just of set life and Hollywood glitz, but also of what it meant to be a quiet, observant human being in the midst of rapidly changing times. Growing up in a hard-working, diverse environment taught the young Harry about perseverance. The city's heartbeat, its laborers, and its communities left an imprint on him. It was the kind of place where your neighbor was your friend, where you'd stand on your porch on summer evenings, sipping lemonade and sharing stories. This sense of community would come to define how he carried himself later in life, both on and off set. When he spoke, he often did so with a certain Midwestern practicality that never quite left his voice. That's perhaps why he always seemed so approachable, so comforting in the roles he played. Audiences could sense that genuine, no-frills sincerity that was etched into him from birth. Back when Harry Morgan was still known by his birth name, Harry Bratsburg, he was a curious boy who found that he had more than a few talents. Early on, he took an interest in the dramatic arts, showing a flair for expression during school plays. But it wasn't the glamorous lights of Hollywood that first called to him. Initially, he studied at the University of Chicago with the intention of pursuing a career in law, a path that seemed respectable, stable, and aligned with the practical mindset that had been instilled in him since childhood. The stage, however, wouldn't let him go so easily. One play led to another, and before long, he was spending more time in theaters than in law libraries, Something inside him ignited when he stepped on stage. He discovered a sense of comfort, a place where he belonged more than anywhere else. As the Great Depression rippled across the country, shaping the landscape of American careers, the stage and screen industry still offered hope, albeit in uncertain doses, for aspiring performers. Morgan, drawn by his passion for acting and perhaps a longing for broader horizons, ventured onto the stage in New York and later found himself in Hollywood. The transition from Detroit to the glamorous West Coast must have felt like night and day, but that grounded sense of self kept him afloat in a place known for glittering illusions and fleeting fame. His first roles were modest, often bits in films that hardly mentioned his name in the credits. But success in Hollywood, especially for supporting actors with distinctive qualities, was often a slow burn job, then an overnight explosion. Little by little, directors and casting agents took note of this Henry Morgan, as he was sometimes credited, who had an understated yet magnetic presence. One of his early uncredited appearances was in To the Shores of Tripoli, 1942, which led to more significant parts over time. Eventually, after a series of small but impressive roles, he landed a key spot in The Oxbow Incident, 1943, a Western drama starring Henry Fonda. While the film may not have been a massive box office smash, it's remembered today as a stark and powerful reflection on the nature of justice and mob mentality. Harry, as a quiet, thoughtful cowhand, left a subtle but lasting impression. But who was this young actor behind the scenes? Those who met him during these early days said he was kind, quick-witted, and eager to absorb everything the industry had to offer. He studied veteran actors, gleaning lessons on timing, nuance, and the power of restraint on screen. Although the name Henry Morgan sometimes clashed with a popular comedian of the same era, he eventually settled on Harry Morgan, which was simpler, friendlier, and just different enough to avoid confusion. That name would stick to him like glue for the next half-century, marking one of the most unassuming yet hard-working careers in show business. Hollywood in the 1940s was a melting pot of aspiration, talent, and raw emotion. War raged overseas, and many actors enlisted or took part in USO shows to support the troops. Movie theaters became a haven for the public to forget their worries for a few hours. In these times, a performer like Harry Morgan, who exuded calm and reliability, was a breath of fresh air. He was never a conventional leading man. He wasn't the tall, dashing heartthrob that studios typically showcased on posters. Instead, he had a distinct character actor face that was earnest, expressive, and endearing. In a world of grandiose personalities, Harry Morgan's artistry was subtle, often shining brightest in scenes where he'd listen and react, letting the star do the talking but quietly stealing the show in his own gentle way. In a film landscape dominated by iconic westerns, lavish musicals, and war dramas, Morgan found his niche in roles that required a certain earthiness, a stable moral compass, or a whimsical sidekick. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, he'd managed to appear in a range of films, sometimes with as many as 4 or 5 credits in a single year. Titles like Dragnet, 1946, All My Sons, 1948, and The Big Clock, 1948, offered him the chance to refine his craft. He wasn't afraid to take small roles because each character he played added another layer to his repertoire. If a director needed a mild-mannered friend, a small-town deputy, or a dependable neighbor, Harry Morgan was the guy to call. Those early film experiences wouldn't just shape his style, they would also prepare him for the medium that would eventually make him a household name: television. When the small screen exploded in popularity in the 1950s, it opened new doors for actors who weren't necessarily big-time movie stars. Harry Morgan soon found himself at the forefront of this burgeoning medium, landing roles in various TV series that were experimenting with new formats, comedic styles, and dramatic arcs. It was here, in episodic television, that he could truly shine. The immediacy and intimacy of TV matched his naturalistic acting style, forming a bond with viewers who felt like they knew him personally. But before diving fully into TV, Morgan continued to build an impressive filmography. One of his notable appearances came in the classic Western High Noon, 1952, starring Gary Cooper. Though Morgan's role was small, it served as another stepping stone, adding a layer of credibility to his career. He soon learned that while lead roles often garnered the spotlight, strong supporting work could grant long-term stability and respect. Industry veterans recognized him as one of those dependable performers who could walk onto a set and immediately make it better. This reputation would carry him forward, particularly as the television era matured. By the mid-1950s, viewers across the nation started recognizing Harry's friendly face in shows like December Bride, which aired from 1954 to 1959. This sitcom starred Spring Byington as a charming older widow, and Morgan portrayed the witty next-door neighbor, Pete Porter. Audiences loved the chemistry between the characters, and Morgan's comedic timing clicked perfectly. His portrayal was so popular, in fact, that the show spun off into a new series, Pete and Gladys, in 1960, centering around Morgan's character and his on-screen wife, Gladys. For many comedic actors, the challenge was to find that sweet spot between humor and warmth, and Morgan seemed to have it naturally. Critics praised him for his understated performances, noting that he brought a genuine sense of realism to even the most outlandish comedic situations. As television sets found their way into more and more living rooms, actors like Harry Morgan became part of families' daily routines. There's a certain intimacy with TV actors. You invite them into your home, watch them at dinner, and grow accustomed to their voices every week. Morgan excelled in that environment. Still, even with his success in sitcoms, he was far from pigeonholed in just comedy. His range allowed him to transition effortlessly into dramatic roles or to play the stern foil to a more rambunctious lead. The more roles he took on, the clearer it became that he was building a reputation as an actor's actor, a professional who knew how to perform, whether the script called for laughter or tears. A turning point arrived in 1967 when Morgan teamed up with Jack Webb for the revival of Dragnet, previously a successful radio show and TV series in the 1950s. The new version, Dragnet 1967, featured Webb reprising his role as Sergeant Joe Friday, with Morgan stepping in as Officer Bill Gannon. This partnership was a study in contrast, Webb's deadpan, methodical approach complemented by Morgan's softer, more humorous edges. Their dynamic resonated with viewers, giving the show a human dimension that could sometimes be missing from straightforward procedural dramas. Morgan's comedic chops weren't overshadowed by the show's serious subject matter. Instead, they shone in subtle ways, through a raised eyebrow, a well-timed sigh, or a quick wit that cut through the tension. Fans might be surprised to learn how dedicated Morgan was to maintaining authenticity in Dragnet. Both he and Webb would consult with real police officers to capture the mannerisms and jargon of law enforcement. Morgan believed that no matter how comedic or dramatic a scene might be, the character should feel grounded in reality. The show's success validated his approach. It ran from 1967 to 1970 and remains a cultural touchstone for police dramas. Morgan's star was shining brighter than ever, and it was clear he'd found his groove in television. Yet his most iconic role, The one that truly cemented his legacy and endeared him to millions was just around the corner. In 1974, MASH was already a smash hit, capturing the dark absurdities of war through comedic brilliance. Alan Alda, Mike Farrell, Loretta Swit, and the rest of the ensemble had crafted a world that spoke directly to the anxieties of America in the aftermath of Vietnam. The show was known for juggling heartbreak and hijinks in a way that had never before been attempted in a sitcom. But there was a shakeup on the horizon. McLean Stevenson, who had played the affable Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, left the series, leaving a command void in the fictional 4077 Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. The producers needed someone who could bring a sense of wisdom, warmth, and comedic timing without simply copying Stevenson's approach. They found exactly that in Harry Morgan. Introduced first as the eccentric General Steele in a memorable guest appearance, Morgan so impressed the showrunners that they brought him back as Colonel Sherman T. Potter. Unlike Blake, who often seemed over his head, Potter was a career military man with decades of experience under his belt. He was still kind, empathetic, and prone to a quip here and there, but there was an undeniable authority in his presence. For fans who were hesitant about losing Henry Blake, Morgan's portrayal offered reassurance. He stepped into the storyline as a paternal figure, someone who could keep the unit functioning amid the chaos of the Korean War while still indulging Hawkeye and BJ in their playful antics. Colonel Potter quickly became a beloved character, largely because Morgan infused him with the very qualities that defined his own off-screen persona: decency, patience, and an underlying sense of humor about life's absurdities. He expertly navigated dramatic storylines, such as dealing with casualties, moral dilemmas, and even episodes dedicated to mental health, while maintaining comedic levity. Whenever Potter barked out an order or got exasperated, there was usually a glint of compassion in his eyes. The balance was perfect. And of course, who could forget his fondness for painting and his cherished horse, Sophie? These touches made him human, reminding audiences that behind every stern commander might lie a gentle soul longing for peace in a world at war. Some of the show's most moving episodes revolve around Potter's wisdom, gleaned from years of service, drawing parallels between World War I, World War II, and the Korean conflict. In many ways, Morgan brought real-life resonance to these scripts. He had lived through multiple wars himself, so he understood the gravity of the historical context behind them. His ability to inject genuine emotion into comedic scenes was a hallmark of MASH, a show that often had viewers laughing one moment and tearing up the next. According to co-star Mike Farrell, who played B.J. Honeycutt, Morgan was the rock that everyone else built upon, a father figure, not only in the script, but also on set, offering guidance and support to younger cast members who were sometimes overwhelmed by the show's immense popularity. One rarely discussed incident on set reveals just how much Morgan cared about the show's authenticity and emotional integrity. During the filming of a particularly heavy scene involving wounded soldiers, Morgan quietly pulled aside the guest actors, many of whom were playing the injured, and reminded them to consider the gravity of war. He urged them to honor the real soldiers who had endured similar pain. It was a brief but powerful moment that demonstrated the respect he held for the stories they were telling. He wasn't just there to read lines. He was there to help create something meaningful, to pay homage to men and women caught in the very real horrors of conflict. However, like any public figure with a long career, Morgan's life wasn't free of turbulence. In 1996, a personal controversy arose when he faced accusations of domestic battery after a dispute with his wife, Barbara. The matter was eventually resolved and charges were reportedly dropped, but it cast a temporary shadow on his otherwise sterling reputation. Friends and family stepped in to highlight the intense stress he'd been under and the complexities of personal struggles that often remain invisible behind the curtain of fame. While some fans were shocked, others recognized that even the most admired individuals can have hidden battles. Morgan, for his part, rarely spoke publicly about the incident, preferring to keep private matters private. Decades later, discussions around this controversy remain nuanced, reminding us that nobody, not even a beloved actor, is without flaws. Yet, as controversies go, this one did not define him. Over a lifetime, Morgan had earned widespread respect, not through bombastic publicity or scandalous headlines, but through consistent, honest performances that resonated with generations of viewers. If anything, that brief period of turmoil brought out empathy from fans who had grown to love him for his down-to-earth demeanor. In the grand tapestry of his life, it remained a complicated but relatively small patch. What remained front and center was the warm memory of a man who had spent decades making people smile, reflect, and appreciate the small mercies amid chaos, be it comedic or real. After MASH ended in 1983 with a finale that broke television records, Morgan reprised his role in the short-lived spin-off After MASH, 1983 to 1985. Though it didn't replicate the massive success of its predecessor, his portrayal of Colonel Potter in a stateside veterans hospital still displayed that charm audiences had grown to adore. He also popped up in guest roles on various shows, delighting fans who were always happy to see the familiar face they'd come to trust. Hollywood roles became fewer as he aged, but he never seemed bitter about it. Instead, he spoke fondly of retirement, occasionally stepping back into the limelight for a cameo or a tribute to classic TV. Off-screen, Morgan's personal life was largely defined by family and close-knit friendships. He was married twice, first to Eileen Detchen, with whom he had 4 sons, and later to Barbara Quine, who remained his spouse until his passing. For a man who spent so many decades in an industry marked by glamour and vanity, Morgan was distinctly devoted to ordinary pleasures, spending time with loved ones, painting, gardening, and by some accounts telling grand stories of Hollywood's earlier days. He was also known to be handy around the house, a holdover from his practical Midwestern upbringing. One of the most striking quotes about Morgan comes from a backstage interview around the end of MASH. When asked about how he managed to stay so calm on set in the midst of comedic chaos, Morgan responded with a thoughtful grin. "There's enough noise in the world as it is. I figure you do your job, and if you do it well, people notice. No need to shout." That simple philosophy guided him not only in his acting, but in life. He was never the boisterous celebrity overshadowing co-stars, never the center of sensational headlines. Yet he consistently earned accolades from critics, colleagues, and viewers alike. In 1980, he received an Emmy Award for his portrayal of Colonel Potter, finally earning a piece of hardware to confirm what fans already knew. He was one of the best in the business. Despite his approachable persona, Morgan was known to be very committed to the craft behind the scenes. He studied scripts meticulously, searching for those small details that could make his character leap off the page. For instance, when developing Colonel Potter's backstory, Morgan took time to imagine Potter's entire life, his childhood, his military service in World War I, and his journey to the 4077. This method acting approach might not have been as famous as the more intense styles of Marlon Brando or Robert De Niro, but it was no less effective. It helped ground his characters in a fully realized emotional world. Castmates recalled how Morgan would sometimes stay in character between takes, not in an ostentatious way, but enough to keep the emotional continuity going. with his resume spanning radio dramas, black and white classics, sitcoms, and cutting-edge 1970s TV. Harry Morgan's career mirrored the evolution of American entertainment. He never seemed to chase trends. Rather, he adapted to them with grace. Even as new generations emerged, championing more modern comedic voices and edgier content, Morgan's timeless warmth remained relevant. He showed that genuine kindness and relatable humor never go out of style. If anything, this made him a reassuring figure in an industry often preoccupied with reinvention. He stood as proof that consistency, professionalism, and a generous spirit could endure in good times and bad. Yet what is the true significance of Harry Morgan's story beyond the accolades and awards? In many respects, he was a mirror reflecting the broader American experience of the 20th century. Born into a world at war, he lived to see the dawn of the 21st century, having witnessed sweeping social, political, and cultural changes along the way. On screen, he navigated comedic sketches about domestic life in the 50s, police procedurals in the 60s, anti-war sentiment in the 70s, and beyond. Off-screen, he married, raised children, and faced personal trials like anyone else. This remarkable lifespan allowed him to integrate a century's worth of perspectives into his performances, reminding viewers that history isn't just an abstract concept. It's lived day by people with hearts and hopes. Historically, Morgan's role on MASH contributed to a show that remains one of the most important cultural commentaries on war. Debuting only a year after the United States formally ended its involvement in Vietnam, MASH used humor and heartbreak to question the logic of sending young people into combat. Colonel Potter's character, shaped by Morgan's gentle guidance, was pivotal to that commentary. He understood war's absurdities, yet upheld the discipline necessary to keep his unit alive. The show's blend of slapstick, dark comedy, and moral quandaries resonated with a society still grappling with fresh memories of conflict. Even today, reruns of MASH attract viewers who find its themes more relevant than ever. Morgan, in many ways, exemplified the voice of reason amid the comedic storm, urging compassion and empathy when cynicism might have been easier. In analyzing Morgan's broader legacy, it's crucial to recognize how he blurred the line between the comedic and the dramatic. Many comedic actors are lauded for their timing, but few manage to slide so seamlessly into dramatic material without missing a beat. Morgan could play a blustering boss, a patient father figure, or a haunted war veteran, all with equal credibility. This versatility influences performers to this day, reminding them that comedic actors can often offer profound dramatic depth. Directors who worked with him learned that comedic talent doesn't necessarily mean shallow sentiment. True humor can come from empathy and shared human experience, elements that also inform the most compelling dramas. Over the years, interviews with Morgan's children paint a portrait of a father who was always present despite a demanding schedule. He might be on set from dawn until dusk, but he'd still find time to read bedtime stories or watch a little league game. One of his sons once recalled how their home was decorated with relics from his father's film and TV roles, old scripts, props, awards, and occasionally whimsical gifts from fans. Harry's eyes would light up each time he shared the story behind these keepsakes. Yet for all his pride in his work, it was clear that the real trophies for him were the ordinary moments of family life. This dual identity, beloved actor to the public, steady father figure at home, reinforced the sense that Morgan had managed to do something few celebrities can: integrate his personal and professional worlds without letting one devour the other. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.